Um, the first thing I wanted to just talk about first off is I wanted to mention that the PUC will need to go to temporary rules again for next year's thresholds. And so I'm assuming, Daryl, that they're going to be similar to what they were this time.
Yeah, so we issued draft rules. There was a comment process. A recommended decision was issued. Exceptions have been filed, which means that they don't go into effect as early as they would otherwise. So they will not be in effect in time to open the proceeding to set the new surcharge rate, the state 911 surcharge rate, and the wireless prepaid 911 surcharge rate. So we're going to have to issue temporary comments just to get us through this next this next rate setting. They will be similar to what are in the draft rules right now. It's really not that much different than what was put out in temporary rules last year, just to give the commission a framework for setting the state 911 surcharge.
Wouldn't the temporary rules from last year just continue to apply until the new ones are adopted, or is there a reason we need to make a change this year?
Temporary rules expire after 210 days.
Okay, thanks.
So my only thought on that was it seems, and I wanted to talk about prepaid in particular, it seems from everything I've seen that we had like a 400% increase in prepaid. And I'm hoping that went throughout the state and everyone has seen that.
They should be. Yeah, we raised over $1 million a month for most of the year so far from prepaid. So everyone should have seen a large increase in the prepaid distributions. The only one that didn't was Fremont County, and that was because of a calculation error on my part. So everybody, I think, saw the corrected percentages that went out to make them whole throughout the rest of the year.
Great. So are there any questions about the prepaid rate, and are we good with temporary rules keeping them the same? Awesome. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about was kind of going forward, some ideas of what this committee needs to be doing. The first thought I have, of course, after the prepaid rate is when we're all on the EZzyNet, it looks like, from what I've seen with their reporting, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to capture everything we need. But Daryl, I wanted your input on that. I know when we talked on that training class for whatever the heck that software is called that I have trouble with, I was hoping that we'd be able to see things ESN wise, but I don't think we can as a whole. And so I wanted to make sure that the group has been able to play with the statistics software from Lumen enough to determine whether that's the method of calculating wireless traffic that we want to use going forward after everybody's on it. So that's one of the topics that I just kind of wanted to discuss with the group, get ideas, and of course, moving forward, dig into that.
So my thought was that we wouldn't be able to go to Clearview for tallying wireless call volumes this year because we still have PSAPs that are migrating onto it. But after looking at Clearview, it looks like we have, through that, I have access to view call totals even from PSAPs that haven't migrated yet. Or if they have migrated, I have statistics going back from before they migrated. So we could try to use Clearview this year to develop the percentages for prepaid distribution. Those have to be delivered. It used to be by November 15th, but now it's October 1st to match the other dates. We have to deliver those to DOR by October 3rd. So, what I can do is as soon as July is over, I can produce a draft list of percentages based on what's in Clearview and send that out to people and see if anybody has any objections to us using those percentages for next year's prepaid distribution. And if they do, we can always go back to the alley reports. But I've never been super comfortable with the alley reports. I think Clearview, despite it being a pain to use, I think Clearview might be giving us more accurate numbers.
Well,
Is there a way we can chat with whoever provides the Clearview? I don't know if that's CenturyLink or if that's Intrado or Intrado through Century, but get an idea how accurate that is, what we're looking for versus the alley reports.
That's Intrado. We could invite them to a future meeting of this committee to talk about that. And I guess another question I have on the prepaid numbers is, in the past, they've done it by tallying the totals from August of the previous year through July of the current year. I don't know why that was chosen. It doesn't match the state's fiscal year. It doesn't match the calendar year. It seems kind of confusing to me. So I don't know if we want to keep that time period for calculation of the percentages or not.
That's a good question too. I think that was done just to be able to make that November report. I think. I could be wrong.
So, I mean, if volumes would vary at different jurisdictions over the course of a year, you would probably want to look at a whole year's worth of data.
Oh, I agree with that. I just don't know why we have a non-standard year like that.
Yeah, I suspect the ski areas probably have more traffic in winter than they do in the summer, but
sure, and probably everywhere else it's busier in the summer.
So there's a couple questions here on the table to the group. One, I really like the idea of having a report, Daryl, from you, Clearview versus the alley retrievals. If there's any way we can, even if we just look at a month or something. I don't know if you get it broken down monthly. I can't remember. But if you, what do you think? Do you think you could, or a 6 month period of time or something that you can compare the two?
Yeah, I could do some sort of comparison of, this is what Clearview shows, this is what the alley reports show, so people can see what the differences would be.
Okay. That I think would be really helpful to the group to kind of decide if we could just go ahead and move to Clearview. I think it would be easier. I agree that the alley retrieval reports I've never been very comfortable with. And I've never been comfortable with them because of their algorithm to take out rebids.
Right.
Is pretty arbitrary.
Whereas rebids would not be counted in Clearview because it's still the same phone call. Now, if somebody gets disconnected and they call back, that's another call that would get counted.
Right. That makes sense.
As long as the call doesn't disconnect, it doesn't count a rebid as another call.
That's awesome.
This sounds like a good idea.
I'm sorry, Matt, I talked over you.
No, that's fine. Might have been me talking over you. I like this idea. We may need to modify it again in the future if we ever get ECATs, but it's definitely a step in a better direction.
Okay, so the first thing is Daryl put together a report before our next meeting, and I'm thinking if we met every 2 months once we kind of decide what our agenda is, or every 3 months, we'll get to that. But so that's one of the things that we can take a look at is Daryl's comparison.
And can we do our next meeting maybe a few days into July? Because that will allow me to pull numbers for a whole fiscal year. And I'm going to suggest that we go to that from now on instead of July, August, July, we do July through June.
I like July through June. What's the group feel?
Sure.
It's the same number. It's the same time period. It's just a different slice of it. And the reason I want to do that is because of those, because the numbers are due earlier in the year now. it'll allow me to get working on them sooner.
Right. And I don't have any objection to even moving our next meeting into August, depending on what people feel like.
I would rather do it in July because whatever this group decides.
Okay.
So in the past, we have not had the commission approve the percentage formulas for prepaid wireless distribution. But because it's due the same day as all of these other rate setting items that are required in statute, the commission is going to start including those in their decision.
Gotcha.
Which means that I need to get it done before August so that I can provide a initial recommendation to the commissioners.
Anything to make your job and the process smoother is good by us here.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Are there any other thoughts or comments on prepaid? Okay. My next topic that I wanted to talk about and see if people wanted to move forward with is the idea, because we are also called prepaid and collections, is the idea of possible group audits, as in a group of authority boards going together to request audits of carriers.
Well, on that topic, maybe a little adjacent to the topic, I wanted to mention that we have hired someone. They have not started yet. They start next Monday. Jolene Sina will be the new 911 surcharge auditor for the Public Utilities Commission. She actually comes from DOR, where she worked with the prepaid 911 surcharge. So she's already somewhat familiar with the 911 funding structure in Colorado, and I'll be doing more training with her as well. But she's got a great background for this. So I think she'll be a great asset to us.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited.
Ditto.
So what does this group feel about a group type audit, or was anyone planning on moving forward with anything on their own, or what's the thought process here, and would we like to work together as a group? Or
So do we have any providers that we suspect or have reason to suspect are not providing proper remittances, or do we have a plan on, who we're going to address?
I don't necessarily have a plan on who we're going to address, because I wanted to find out from this group if this was something they wanted to pursue. And as an answer to your question, do we have carriers that we feel are not doing it correctly? I would say there are several on my radar. I don't know what other groups have found.
We've spent the last year and a half getting all of our OSPs that aren't monthly remitters to convert to monthly, and we've been eventually successful with that. And as a result of that, setting aside the fact that it's pretty clear that all of them back into their line counts, we don't have any red flags with the 60 phone companies that we deal with at this time. So METS is not on the warpath for an audit at the moment, and honestly, I don't have time for it. But we would be supportive if somebody sees an issue. The big question for us is the backing into thing, and I think that's a way bigger issue than it would seem like, since they all do it. And we have emails from different OSPs that basically admit to that straight up.
AT&T testified in a hearing that they can't do it the other way. It will cost them tons of money to do it the other way. and Tim said in the last hearing, Tim Goodwin, that because of changes during the month, that's the only way they can do it. No, I'm not saying that any of those things is true. That's just what they've told us.
Yeah. We've had similar discussions with them and with a local mom and pop phone company here regarding changes throughout the month, and I can respect the cost that it would and burden it would add to them to nail that down to a T. So I don't know how we as a stakeholder group address that, but in terms of it seeming like we're not getting remittances, we don't have cause for concern right now.
And I would say too that another thing we need to think about is the cost benefit analysis here. If they're backing into the numbers, how much difference does that make from if they were actually getting real world line counts? And if it doesn't create a huge difference in the amount of money that would be coming to the governing bodies, or maybe it would even hurt the governing bodies to force them to do real line counts. Maybe that's something we don't want to pursue.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not for letting anybody off the hook easy. That's not my MO. But with this, I don't know if we have anything to push.
Anybody else? I mean, I know for the groups I've looked at, I've compared landline to landline to the sRDB, and there's huge discrepancies when you compare what's in your selective router database to what you're getting in remittance. And there's numerous companies that I've tried to work with in the past that have given me various different reasons for that, none of which pan out.
Is that like the DID issue?
Yeah, and none of that which pans out math-wise, because I started getting, after that conversation, I started getting the selective router database broken down on class of service. And so it's just strictly, the DID scenario did not pan out to be the issue. However, I don't know what the issue is. And so there were like, I think 6 companies or so that I would like to request an audit from the 3-4 authorities that I represent and line counts. And I didn't know if anybody else would be interested.
Well, if you identify the companies, I can go to Brett's and ask them if they want to.
Okay.
I don't have authority to speak on their behalf because I'm outside, but I could. I would need some information to say, do you want to participate in this? And I think since you would understand the idea, we apply for the PUC in advance so that we would know whether or not we would have to come out of pocket for it or the PUC would be funding it.
And Jackie, is that stemming from multi-line telephone systems where they're paying for maybe the supporting circuits, but not for the associated DIDs? Is that?
That was their claim. However, when I look at the class of service in the selective router database, they still are not remitting near the records that they have in that database. One of the things early on that I'd asked them about, because a lot of them will purchase like blocks of 10, 20,000 numbers. And I suspect that they were putting them in the database, inflating their numbers in the database. However, I don't know that. And so that's kind of where I would like to audit, just to make sure that, and like I said, this only applies to landline. And as we lose more and more landline,
So I remember in the past, there was a thing where when CenturyLink or its predecessors, whenever they disconnected phone service at like a house or an apartment, they would leave it in soft dial tone. would that still show up? And I guess the problem is that the market now, they're probably not staying empty very long.
Yes, I believe that would show up, but we're talking huge discrepancies. We're not talking.
And I don't know if that applies in the post-POTS world. That's probably more of a POTS thing.
Well,
Well, that's what wireline is, though, isn't it? Or does it also include fiber MLTS?
you can have PRIs and other services that aren't POTS, but kind of behave like POTS and would have lots of DIDs. That might be a big problem for the more urban 911 authority boards.
I wonder if that problem has become exacerbated during the pandemic too, with maybe they had a lot of DIDs for a multi-line telephone system, and now their employees are working from home, so they're not maintaining that anymore, or they've switched to a different kind of system.
It'll be interesting to see when I get the new selective router database. I, of course, do have historical data of the selective router database. Obviously, it's decreased significantly.
Although I think a lot of it's cost savings in general. The city of Montrose just switched from CenturyLink for its PRIs, for its MLTS. So they had no POTS. It was all VoIP after fashion. But they switched to Granite telecommunications, and well, it's been a nightmare for a lot of reasons. But the biggest factor was cost savings.
Is it safe to say they don't? Sorry, go ahead.
Who was who switched to Granite? It's been a nightmare ever since.
City of Montrose for their multi-campus MLTS or multi-site MLTS. And it's been a nightmare for them with secondary services like long distance and things like that. But basically, I'm just relaying that it was a huge cost savings to them. But partly as a result of this, they also canceled their entire PSLE service for every ID in the city. Yeah,
I forgot I wasn't on mute. Oops.
and I brought it up, and anyway, they swear they're going to put it back eventually. But the point is, cost, I think, is driving a lot of these kinds of changes away from POTS. Lumen's pricing is gone out the wall. They on some of their digital stuff, they just quadrupled West Coast prices for a T1 after contract ending. So anyway, bunny trail. Sorry, back to the top.
That's okay. I do have to say that Lumen CenturyLink is not the culprit at all. Their numbers seem to be within 10%.
Yeah.
Which I give their take to the non-collections and the exempts and all that.
I would agree with that from what we're seeing here.
Yeah. There are other companies that are more of a issue. As in, 100,000 in the SRDB to remitting 5,000 lines.
Right.
So some of them are huge.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this group think? I'm certainly going to pursue this within my groups, but I didn't know, like I said, is this something this group wants to handle or not? I guess is my question really. I will certainly report any findings I have from my groups.
I'm back.
Glad you're back.
Welcome back.
My VPN crashed.
Well, I think Brett's may be interested, but would want to know, the basis and, whether or not we go forward if the PUC doesn't grant funding for it.
Okay. Well, and it's my understanding that if it's a small group that's moving forward, that you could petition and help me out, Daryl, but you could petition the PUC, but they probably would leave that up to the groups to pay for, unless it was larger.
I couldn't prejudge the decision from the commission, but before we have that petition, we have to have rules in place for it. And so until these rules are finalized, there's not really a process by which the commission, the governing bodies can petition for paying for an audit. We may include that in our temporary rules to give the authorities an avenue in the meantime, but as of right now, until those temporary rules come out, there's not a process to use.
Okay. All right, that sounds to me for now. I'll just keep plugging along and just keep this group apprised of what I'm finding and see if anybody else wants, if we want to do it as a group-wide thing, or if we want to just keep it as the few authorities. And Joe, I'll certainly let you know what I've discovered.
Thank you.
I'm not in a huge push hurry. I'm thinking this is more of a next year thing, but I just kind of wanted to get it on this group's radar.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to look for, if they're like wild variations or remittances from month to month, that might indicate something funny.
That's true, but usually those usually when I see those are kind of, I contact the company and they show me why or fix it.
Okay.
Usually. So. Okay. Now, then the next question for this group is, what else would this group like to put on their agenda on their and to tackle?
World peace.
All right, Jeff.
Jackie, I wonder, with the new state 911 surcharge in place now, and a lot more money coming in through the wireless prepaid surcharge, I wonder if this group would want to, like, review numbers just like on a monthly basis to see what has come in, how many companies are delinquent. At least we have that for the state 911 surcharge, which is something we've never gotten on the prepaid because DOR won't share that information with us, just to kind of create some situational awareness on what's happening with funding.
It can be like dealing with insurance companies, tracking down the right person to make sure that those charge changes are implemented. persistence.
Right. No, I think that's a good idea, actually, if that's available to this group.
Unlike the DOR filings, the state 911 surcharge filings are all filed in a public proceeding. So if I aggregate that information and share it with you, I'm not sharing anything that you couldn't have done yourself.
Well, I also believe, doesn't the statute allow us to get greater information directly from DOR that the PUC or authorities might request?
I recall there being something like that in the statute, but I can't remember exactly what it says. I'll have to look at it again.
I remember we were concerned because they wouldn't share any further detail with us than the summary reports. The other thing is, I recall back when we first put this in, Darryl, you had done some projections as to what prepaid minute usage might be in Colorado to compare to remittances, and there is a huge disparity. Maybe now it's just a big disparity, but is that something we could do again?
Unfortunately, I've looked since that time. I've looked, and there has been no research published online that I can use to build that same prediction formula. So back in 2011, when we were putting in the prepaid surcharge at 1.4%, that 1.4% was derived from looking at information that was available through J.D. Power and Associates, as well as what's the name of the wireless association, like CTIA. They had published online information that I was able to put together into a formula to say, this is how much we should raise from the prepaid surcharge based on number of how many people have prepaid service and the average number of minutes that people purchase per month if they're using prepaid service. And that information has not been updated since then. So if I were to try to build that formula again, I'd be using 10 or 15-year-old data, which is not really reliable enough to say this is how much we should be getting from prepaid.
I wonder if there are reports filed with the FCC on that. See if I can find anything.
Okay. I mean, I kind of doubt it because the FCC until now has not really gotten involved in state 911 surcharge remittances. But who knows, maybe there'll be something.
Yeah, not on remittances, but just on volume of prepaid minutes used, because they've tended to always try and measure subscription rates. And
yeah, remember now that the measure for us is not number of minutes purchased, it's number of transactions. And you could buy the same number of minutes once a month, or you can buy them 4 times a month. So it's going to be difficult to, if all we can get is number of minutes purchased, it'll be difficult to translate that into number of transactions.
yeah, and you're saying that the kind of average type information there might be that would also be 10 years old.
Right, and I never saw information on how many transactions. All I saw was number of minutes, and that hasn't been updated for like 10 years.
So with the prepaid, though, it seems that the projections that you made, was that really 10 years ago? 10 years ago are now being kind of blown out of the water. Is that correct?
Well, what we calculated was that by setting it at 1.4%, we should have gotten about $7.5 million a year. We never got even close to that. We got a little over $2 million a year. I think the highest was closer to $3 million. Since we've switched to a per transaction model and changed it to a flat rate of $1.38, we're now getting over $1 million a month. So figure about $13 million a year, which is certainly much better, but it doesn't really tell us anything in regards of whether we're getting what we should be getting. Because to know that, we would have to know how many transactions are actually taking place in the state.
Gotcha. Well, I guess my take on it is that it feels like we're at least getting an amount that is much better, and that I don't know if we need to delve into it, but what does this group think?
Well, I'm always in favor of verifying that what you're receiving is what you should be receiving. I don't know how we would go about comparing what DOR is receiving to what we think should be happening in terms of number of transactions, because there's just no data out there to compare it to.
So does our auditor have the right to audit vendors of prepaid minutes?
No. Our auditing authority extends only to the local emergency telephone charges and the state 911 surcharge, not the prepaid.
Okay, because I know way back like 10 years ago, Dennis Tharp and I met with folks at DOR, and they said they mostly only audit the big box stores where they get the biggest bang for their expense of conducting the audits. And at one point they said, and besides, all the small guys cheat. I don't know what, but they didn't want us to be, Dennis with some of his authorities was going out and buying minutes at different stores and seeing if they collected the prepaid surcharge, and DOR had a big problem with that.
Well, I don't think anybody can stop you from going out and buying minutes just to see if they charge you the fee, but then taking the next step and asking DOR, okay, they collected the fee, did they remit it to you? That's where I think we're going to run into problems, because there's no way to, DOR won't share that information because they consider it private taxpayer information.
Or did they remit all maybe they remit some, but skin 20%.
Yeah, I have no idea how we verify that.
And I guess the other question is, are we overcharging? Are we collecting too much if we're obviously getting 12 million? And
No, I need to hire some help, and that money is going to pay for that.
Yeah,
I was going to say this money is long overdue, and the smaller authority boards are not getting as much as the larger ones, and I think it's really helping them. But that's just my take. I'll let the smaller authority boards pipe in there.
Yeah, since the prepaid now, the flat transaction rate is equal to the average emergency telephone charge rate plus the state 911 surcharge. So if everyone who uses prepaid bought minutes once per month on average, then it's accurately set. If they buy minutes more than once per month, then we're overcharging them. If they buy minutes less than once per month, then we're undercharging them. And unfortunately, I just don't have any data to say which scenario is accurate.
well, and I think there's a perception, and it may be wrong, that the main people who use prepaid are lower income people who may not qualify for Obama phones and hitmen who want throwaway phones.
Remember, though, part of
I think it's the hitman.
yeah, if I remember correctly, part of the discussion during the implementation of this fee in the first place was the European model, where a significant part of their European population moved away from regular standard accounts to these kinds of phones. And there was supposition that the Americas might follow suit at some point down the road.
Well, and the market's changed a lot in the last 10 years too. What you're seeing now is a lot of prepaid plans that actually look a lot like postpaid plans, where they're calling it prepaid, but you renew it once a month and you're getting unlimited talk and text, so there's no minutes to buy. And I don't know what direction the market's going to take from here. I mean, I can guess, but that's just speculation. I can tell you that one of my commissioners was very concerned about the impact that the surcharge, the going to a flat rate, might have on lower income consumers. But that's built into the statute now. So in order to change that, it would require another piece of legislation.
Well, and isn't there a retained rate or a lip cap on the rate for the Obama phone users?
So the proper term is the Lifeline customers, and yes, they in order to get permission to sell Lifeline phones, they have to apply for eligible telecommunications carrier status with the PUC, and as part of that process, a percentage rate is usually negotiated instead of a flat fee, and in the statute allows that percentage rate to continue. We do have to set it to be the same for everyone this year, so that'll be part of the rulemaking, and I think it said 1.9% or 1.6%. I can't remember what it was. And then going forward, there's a cap on how much that percentage can be.
Well, and during this legislation, we did work with one of the Lifeline providers on this, and they had some suggestion and language, and they seemed to be okay with it. Unlike when we first went with prepaid, which was well before Obama, the Lifeline customers had a bigger problem with being charged at all. So I think as we move forward that, sorry, I've got an echo, darn computer. Did that help? Or did it get rid of me?
I haven't heard any echo here.
It's only very slight on our end, Jackie. I can hear it, but
Must have gotten rid of me.
distracting me.
Sounds like I was still on my weekend.
Uh,
It's all good, Jackie. Have at it.
Becky?
Oh, technical difficulties. You're muted.
oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Anyway, the Lifeline customers, I think over time, since the time that the prepaid was put in, the Lifeline customers had gotten accustomed, I guess, to having that. And it's my understanding as well that the Lifeline customers aren't impacted because the companies that provide Lifeline actually kind of pull that weight. Not that they are statutorily required to, I think they just do. That was my understanding of the conversations anyway.
I'm sorry, Jackie. Say that again.
That was my understanding from when we talked with Greg last year, that their problem was that the company actually takes on that fee somehow for the Lifeline customers.
Right. They're paying it out of the subsidy they get.
Yes, and that's based on their procedures, not on that they have to do that. And so it's my understanding that the Lifeline customers are not financially impacted, but the companies are.
Well, I wouldn't say they don't have to do that because they agree to do that as part of the ETC certification that they get from the commission. And
Gotcha.
Once that gets approved by the commission, then yes, they have to do that. But it wasn't written in statute. Now it is written in statute that there's a percentage, and what they agreed to in their ETC applications is grandfathered in until this year, and we have to set it. We have to set them all at the same rate, which I think is 1.6%.
A lot of the track phone proceedings.
Information at one point of what kind of profit they were making, even when they were remitting the surcharge out of the subsidy, and it was just cutting into their profits. It wasn't making them incur a loss or anything. They just weren't raking quite as much in.
Well, I understand that because the subsidy from the Lifeline program is so low that giving away the phones was actually a loss leader for them, and they were making it up through people buying additional minutes because there was a limit to that. And now I don't think they do limit the minutes. It's really focused more on broadband, giving them access to being able to do things like fill out job applications online and things like that.
Well, I guess my point really is that I don't see it as a issue any longer since we went through all the legislation, and it seems like everybody agreed to be where they are. Is that a good understanding of that?
I think so. I mean, and really it's written in statute now, so to change it would really be something that this group would want to coordinate with the legislative committee, but having it been changed so recently, I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
I think if it was a problem, the carriers would have tried to raise it this year. They have a much better lobby and much more influence with politicos than we do.
This is unfortunately true.
Okay, then the only thing I really have on our agenda is the looking at Daryl's reports and then the statewide collections and seeing what kind of reporting we can see out of that, and then making decisions from there. Is there anything else this group would like to tackle? If not, I'm going to look at my calendar because Daryl would like us to meet in the first part of July. to look at his comparison. I
Away from
am
the
open.
first week?
I'm open the week of the 5th. And it looks like I'm open the week of the 12th as well. So what works for people?
I don't know
I'd
what.
say the 12th. Stay away from that first week. That's the long holiday weekend. And
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion. I think the 12th would be better because who knows what people are taking off for the Independence Day.
Do we want to do the same time on a Monday, or do we want to move it to Tuesday, or?
Either way works for me.
Anybody else want to weigh in there?
Shannon just pointed out that Navigator's that week.
Oh,
Well, for my part, Monday morning is okay on the 12th.
how many in this group are going to Navigator? Shannon, I know you are.
Yeah, I'm not sure who else is going.
So it's the 13th through the 15th, which means the 12th will be a travel day for those people. But if not very many people are going, we could still have it on the 12th.
Okay, well, let's do 11 o'clock on the 12th then.
Sounds good. I'll send out the meeting invite.
Thank you. And just let us know when you get the comparison out, and we can take a look at that next time.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time, and happy Monday.
Yay.
Yay.
Boy, howdy.
Woohoo. Here we go. I've got an hour break and then another meeting, but you know, hey,
Yep.
All right. Take
see you
care,
all
all.
soon. All right.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Adios. Bye-bye.
Bye.